Okay, y'all. Well, we're coming up to the end of the actual, real biblical year. So the seasons, or the 4 quarters of the true calendar, coincide with the equinoxes during the year. So the spring equinox actually, that is when the year turns over, and the first month of the new year actually is. So our year doesn't actually end in December, but it ends in March, and then the spring equinox comes, and then there's a 0 day, and then the first month starts after that. And so just think about, December means Deca. November Nova means 9. And so if November and December are the ninth and 10th months, then January can't actually be the beginning of the new year. See how they just put the truth in plain sight, but then we have been taught and indoctrinated into the system to accept that December is the end of the year and January is the first month. But see, when you can just take a step back and really, through knowledge, even looking into the names of the month and what they mean, you realize that December is indeed the 10th month, and there's still 2 more months after that. And so you go and search out the biblical calendar and find out that, yes, indeed, in March the year ends, and the new year actually begins after that spring equinox. And so, saying all that, we have the actual beginning of the new biblical year coming, and in that first month is Passover. And Passover is not Easter, and Easter is not Passover. They're two separate things. One is actually God's holy appointed time, his appointed holy feast time, and the other is a pagan holiday put forth into practice and tradition by Rome. And so the first part of this pagan holiday that is called Easter is Lent. And Easter is translated, its actual meaning and name comes from Ishtar. Ishtar, and then it's translated in the German, I believe, as Oster, and then we get Easter from Oster, but you work it back and it's Ishtar, Easter, Ishtar. It's all about that false goddess and the worship to her. And so the first part, the prelude to that, is that 40 days of Lent. And it says here in this book, should you celebrate God's holy days? It goes through his holy days, it goes through the pagan days. And so Lent, it says, is a perversion of the days of unleavened bread and Pentecost. So what about Lent? Although the word Lent means spring season, it is now mainly observed in the winter right after Mardi Gras. Yeah, and you remember the when the biblical year starts, so that's what he's talking about. It's observed in the winter of the biblical year, right after Mardi Gras. The World Book of Encyclopedia states Lent is a religious season observed in the spring. It begins on Ash Wednesday, 40 days before Easter, excluding Sundays, and ends on Easter Sunday. And what Lent is, actually, if you look into it, is that what the mythology is based on, the paganism uh, tradition is based on, is Nimrod and Tammuz, or Nimrod and Ishtar, was Semiramis, I believe originally. Anyways, they were married, and then Nimrod dies, and then she, Semiramis, that becomes known as Ishtar, becomes pregnant. She claims by the sun, and Nimrod was known as the sun god. He became the sun god, so she was in the sunlight and became pregnant. And that process, Nimrod, being the sun god over her, impregnated her spiritually, and then she had Tammuz, the sun. And so Tammuz ends up getting killed by a wild boar. So then Semiramis Ishtar commands and does a 40-day fast to weep and mourn the loss of Tammuz, and then to commemorate the end of that mourning and weeping period, as you even see in the Bible, I believe in Jeremiah, I think, where the women are weeping for Tammuz. It's that 40-day period that becomes Lent. And so, like I said, to commemorate that, at the end of that mourning season, they slaughter the pig. So, going back to taking revenge on the pig that killed the sun Tammuz, and then eating that pig. So that's where the 40 days of Lent comes from, and that's where the tradition comes from of eating the pig also at the end of that 40 days, and then Easter cap it all off with the eating of that pig. And what about Ash Wednesday? It says, well, it's not an original Christian nor biblical holy day. Ash Wednesday, the name Dies Cenorum, Day of Ashes, which it bears in the Roman Missal, is found in the earliest existent copies of the Gregorian Sacramentary, and probably dates from at least the 8th century. On this day, all the faithful, according to ancient customs, are exhorted to approach the altar before the beginning of Mass. And there the priest, dipping his thumb into the ashes previously blessed, marks the forehead. So the Church of Rome adopted it officially in the 8th century. It should also be noted that the idea of placing a cross of ashes on the forehead comes from sun god worship and other forms of paganism. Where ashes were considered the seed of the fire god, and with power to absolve all sins, at Rome's New Year Feast of Atonement in March, people wore sackcloth and bathed in ashes to atone for their sins. Then, as now, New Year's Eve was a festival also for eating, drinking, and sinning, on the theory that the sins would be wiped away on the following day, as the dying god of Mars took his worshippers' sins with him into his own death. Therefore, the Carnival of Dies Martis, or the Day of Mars. In English, this was Tuesday because Mars was associated with the Saxon god. The French Carnival Day was then called Mardi Gras, Fat Tuesday, the merrymaking day before Ash Wednesday.